Always a pleasure to speak. Always a pleasure to speak to Ort, and always a pleasure to share our research with this audience. And as you mentioned, this was not our most recent research, because lately we've been releasing findings of various projects by the month and sometimes by the week. Just last week, we released our research into online retail in South Africa. And 2 weeks earlier, we released research into cloud computing across Africa. But the project just before that was the most loved local businesses in South Africa, which was a fascinating exercise that we conduct every year for Santam. And the approach we take is that we scour the rating sites on the internet, like Google Maps, TripAdvisor, Zomato, and the like. And we identify the 10 most highly rated local businesses, or any business, but in specific categories that speak to local services. We look at 12 categories and we look at 10 regions. So that's, if there's some arithmetic boffins here, I'm sure there are 10 regions, 12 categories, and 10 companies per category. There's 1,200 businesses that we select, and then we run a survey using Facebook, Facebook's, I forget what it's called now, Messenger. There have been so many new ones since then. But Facebook Messenger has a zero-rated option on most networks, where if you use text only, you don't pay. So if one is able to run a text-based survey, you can reach the widest cross-section of South Africans possible on any platform. And we work with a partner called RatePop that creates a bot. We hear a lot about bots now with ChatGPT and the like, but we've been using these bots on Messenger for about 5 years now. And it's a great way of surveying people on a very specific demographic basis, where you can target them by city, province, age, etc. Anyway, that's the background. That's the methodology of what I'm going to be sharing with you. But before anything else, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be with you. And thank you, Tracy and Ariella, as always, for encouraging me to speak and finding reasons for me to speak. Good to see old friends here as well. Young old friends like Ellis and Mel. Really good to see you on board. And David, also an old Jet friend as well, and the rest of you, of course. But those are the people that I've interacted directly with, or that I've known for a very long time. I won't tell you how long. So without further ado, let me share my presentation with you. And tell me if you can't see it, but you should be able to see. Excellent. So it's called Most Loved Local for short. And it was conducted at the end of last year on behalf of Santam. And essentially, we had in the survey 240 respondents from each of the 10 regions. So we surveyed 2,400 people. After having created a short list from the 1,200 companies we identified the top 3 in each region and in each category. And then we asked people in each of these centers to choose their favorite businesses. And out of that came, firstly, the year before, the results were as such. So you can see from the 2021 results, some are the smallest of businesses, some are large businesses like the Sun City Casino, and then you have chains like Dis-Chem, but we're not looking for Dis-Chem as a chain. We're looking for a specific outlet. So you might find Dis-Chem and ShopRite, Checkers, and the like featuring, because they think like locals in those environments. That's a Dis-Chem in White River. That was the top pharmacy of 2021. But then on the other end of the scale, you have Ardendorf Machinery Mart as the best motor workshop. You have 5-Star Car Wash. We have Wash Day Angels, and so on. And these were the other 4 category winners. And you can see again, it's not your usual. It's not the big names in big places necessarily. Outeniqua Family Market is on the Garden Route, for example. And Viva Gym is in what used to be Port Elizabeth, now Gebera. So we really cover the entire country, and we don't play favorites just because of size. These are the winners in 2022. The top restaurant was one in Melrose Arch in Johannesburg, but then again, the Outeniqua Family Market in George comes up as a top food market. I'm not going to talk you through every one of them, but you can see again, big names like Kruger National Park. People really see that as a local, a loved local business. And then the other 6 categories, Viva Gym, once again in Port Elizabeth, or Gebera. What's really interesting is to see the kind of businesses that keep coming up, and it tells you that they're doing something right. But again, this one shows you that it can be the most humble or it can be the most prestigious. So the best spa in the country was the one and only spa, which very few of us would ever visit because you probably need to take out a bond to go there. But the reality is that's got the votes as the favorite local or the best local service. And a really cool one is the Umhlanga Medisport Pharmacy coming up as the best pharmacy in the country, outperforming last year's winner, which was Dischem in White River. And then the last one there, building materials, the best building supplies local business in the country, Buco in Rustenburg. So it can be anywhere in the country. So what makes a business a most loved local business? So the top restaurant in the country was one where we thought it really gives a good indication. Just to remind you, that is the Mesopoli restaurant in Melrose Arch. And we asked the owner, Margarita Tsangaris, chef, what was the key to building the business? And she spoke about the challenges, but she really brought it down to consistently good food and service. And when you make mistakes, you address them quickly. Excuse me. And it's staying true to what you do best, not being caught up in fads. But I particularly like the idea that they acknowledge mistakes when they happen, they address them quickly. And I'll just quickly tell you a very quick anecdote of what not to do. In my neighborhood in Linden, there was a restaurant, a very large restaurant, very well appointed, probably the biggest restaurant in Linden. So massive investment went into it. But when something went wrong, and Cheryl, my wife, complained on Facebook about it, on Google Maps, they threatened her with legal action if she didn't take down her review or her comments. She did take it down. She didn't want to have to spend time fighting legal action, but we made sure to screen grab their threat, and their threat then got accelerated, you might say, certainly amplified on social media. On Twitter, I posted it. It then got the attention of the top consumer journalist in the country, and it was a public relations disaster for the restaurant. I don't say that was the cause, but the restaurant no longer exists. And that was probably one of many experiences that people had, and one of the many factors in it going out of business. Restaurants that provided consistent food and service, acknowledged mistakes, addressed them, and saw themselves as part of the community rather than threaten their customers, tended to survive and thrive. Otaniqua Family Market in George, another great case study. What Dion Mocker did is visited every farmer's market in the country to understand how these operate. And he traveled the world, Egypt, Thailand, Southeast Asia, for inspiration. And before the pandemic, they were getting 500,000 visitors a year because they understood what it takes to be a loved local business. And then we look at the Medisport pharmacy in Umhlanga and David Fraser's comment, accessibility, how we go out of our way to engage with our customers personally, our efforts to build relationships. And as he says, when customers walk into our store, they see the same friendly faces they've known for years. Staff greet, recognize, and engage with customers from the second they step into the store. That's the complete opposite of an establishment that will threaten you with legal action if you criticize them. And then I want to share this one with you, a dry cleaner. What makes a dry cleaner stand out? You'd think surely all they have to do is be dry cleaners. But the fact is they were voted the most loved local dry cleaner 2 years in a row, or at least for a second time, which means that people really, really respond to what this business is doing and what it's doing right. So one of the keys to their business is low staff turnover. It allows them to build solid relationships with staff, very similar to the Umhlanga Medisport pharmacy. Clients know they'll see the same welcoming faces and receive the same quality service. So what makes a business a most loved local business? And starting at the top and the biggest bar, 22% of respondents. Bear in mind that people here chose their single most important feature. So they would have other features as well. And what one really has to do is combine those top 5 or so as the keys to being a most loved local business. But it's really about an overall experience. What they call in business strategy these days a 360-degree experience. But it's amazing how few businesses actually understand what is meant by 360 degrees. And it means that this entire circle, a circle being 360 degrees, actually applies. You can probably cut out fast service at the bottom. People don't want fast service if it's shoddy or if it comes with bad treatment. They want a good experience overall, good service, value for money, quality products. Some want a delivery service, but almost as many want a personal service. The shopping environment is important and friendly staff is important. Convenience, of course, features, but it's not as important as the other features, and nor is fast service. So in the Most Loved Local report, which you can download from the internet, I've shared something like 14 key insights, and I'm going to give you the 10 most important insights to start with. Firstly, an overall good experience is key, followed by value for money and quality products. Secondly, you've got to consider your demographics as well. And when we looked at the breakdown between men and women, we found a few key differences. They weren't often major differentiators, but in certain cases they leaped out. And we found that for women in particular, convenience and delivery were more important than for men. And this, as I've said here, is a factor of women typically juggling multiple roles compared to men, working, raising children, getting the kids to and from school, which means that having someone helping by delivering or by having convenient access is going to be more important to them than to men. So another insight that emerges from this is understand the differences in different kinds of customers and what they require from you. And then slightly different from what makes a business loved is what makes you recommend a local spot. And similar features leaped out: a good experience overall, good service, good value for money, quality products. But then accommodating and always going the extra mile, right up there as well. So when you look at those first five, there's not a vast difference between them, from 18% to 13%, not massively differentiated in terms of importance. So if you want your business to be recommended, then you've got to focus on all of those five. And the rest are also important. The rest are what you might call hygiene factors, which people almost expect. So they're not going to recommend you based on the fact that you are friendly or that you have clean premises. They're going to recommend you based on that good overall experience. By the way, because the survey was conducted last year, COVID was still a factor in terms of COVID protocols. Today, it's almost completely invisible. I've just been traveling extensively for the last couple of weeks in South Africa, and I've seen maybe 2 people wearing masks, for example. So COVID really is history, although we know it's still there and people are still falling sick with it. There are still fatalities, but in terms of one's experience in supporting businesses in general, it's vanished completely. So the third insight I wanted to share, and again, making the point that you've got to look at your demographic segments and look at what makes them different. And we found that age was not a factor in most features of what makes a business loved or what makes people recommend it. But we found that there was one age group, the 35s to 45s, which typically are when people have reached executive level in business and they're at the highest earning capacity on the one hand, or their earnings are increasing at a faster rate than ever before. Value for money is suddenly less important to them. So they clearly are flush with cash, possibly, or they just want to get things done. So they'll pay what it takes to get things done because they have busy lives. Possibly that could also be a factor of having kids and having to spend a lot of time sorting out the kids. You don't have time to shop around. And then this one, some of you will appreciate. The older generation, the 56 plus age group, stands out massively above the rest in terms of expecting businesses to go the extra mile and wanting to be made special. The funny thing in this particular segment of the research was that easy parking was more of a priority for a slightly younger age group, the 46 to 55 age group. The older ones probably have time on their hands. They're not in a rush as that younger age group is. And then what more are you looking for in a local business? So this is after those key features, the things that make a business loved and the things that make you recommend a business. Now you've said that's what you want. You want a good overall experience. You want value for money. You want quality products. But what else do you want? So looking beyond that, you could say this is the second tier of important features, but it's also the features that you might say are people's next most important. And number one is friendly staff. And that's where you can see the dry cleaners and the pharmacies that emphasize the friendliness of their staff and knowing their customers as standing out. So again, in terms of the gap between them, the top four only have a 5% gap between them. So friendly staff being rewarded for being a local and coming back, going the extra mile, and offering a delivery service. So that has leaped out from pre-COVID, where delivery service wasn't that important. But Checker 6060 has changed the thinking of South Africans in going shopping, especially for groceries, because we now know that in a pinch, if we can't get to the shops will come to us. So now that's expected more and more of local businesses. But bear in mind, again, it's not a massive proportion of people for whom it's a deal breaker. 13% want that as an additional service. But again, this was about which is your most important next feature. So just because 13% doesn't mean it's insignificant, because 18% stands out as number one. But again, people are going to want friendly staff, then they want to be rewarded, then they want you to go the extra mile, then they want you to offer a delivery service. So all those go hand in hand. Having an app, a lot less important for a local business. It's still out there. So if you have an app, it's going to give you some advantage, but not massive. And then that authentic South African experience of a product is small in terms of percentage, but it looms large in people's minds. It comes up several times during the survey. So that brings us to our next key insight, the human connection, in terms of what people want from a local business. And the fact that friendly staff leaps out, and that in many of these companies that are the most loved local know their customers by name, allows customers to connect with them. So the customer feels that you are part of their community because of that human connection. What puts you off a local business? You might think it stands to reason, but it's amazing how many businesses are guilty of these. So bad or slow service. It's very fortunate that the Department of Home Affairs isn't a business, but if they were, they would probably be the most hated business in the country for that reason. But second is unfriendly staff. And it's astonishing how common that is. And you find it especially with businesses where the person serving the customer feels superior to the customer because they know more than the customer. And there I'm thinking about building supplies, car service places, and the like, where you have a level of expertise that's typically far greater than that of the customers. And you can take two approaches to that. The one is that you can see yourself as being there to support the customer in adding to their knowledge or assisting them in filling the gaps to their knowledge, or you can see yourself as being superior and you're going to tell the customer what to do. And that's number two there, unfriendly staff. Customers respond very negatively to that. And the word of mouth for bad service is actually far greater than the word of mouth for good service. So this is how you can destroy your business as opposed to building your business. Poor quality product stands to reason. Shopping environment pretty much stands to reason. And then poor value for money stands out as well as one of the top 5 features. So the insight here is that bad or slow service has a ripple effect, because if a customer experiences bad service, they're not only less likely to go back, but they're going to tell people about the experience, and other people will also avoid that business. It's not rocket science. It just takes a bit of thinking, and most of you probably know this, but it always bears repeating, because so many small businesses and local businesses don't seem to understand that slow service is going to be a slow bleed for their business. Then we ask people to agree or disagree with statements about pre and post pandemic relationships with businesses. And it is interesting that 20% of respondents developed a closer relationship with local businesses than before the pandemic. A fair proportion realized what a big difference these businesses make in their daily lives, and another fair proportion how much they rely on their local businesses. Those are the three key findings in terms of how local businesses are viewed since the pandemic. Close relationships, big difference to daily lives, and how much people rely on those local businesses. So that was the key insight from that section. Both that people developed a closer relationship and realized how much they depended on local businesses. So what that really means is if you do have a small business, or if you're advising a small business, it's got to be very clear to you that there's a relationship on the one hand, and that there's a reliance as well. There are probably a few other R's that we could come up with, but the two R's are as important in local businesses today than reading, writing, and arithmetic were in education. And then when we look at it by gender, there were fascinating nuances as well. Men seem to develop close relationships with local establishments than before. Not that women didn't have close relationships. The fact is women tended to have those close relationships to a greater extent before the pandemic, and men were playing catch up to women. But where women grew in their appreciation of local businesses was becoming more aware of how much they rely on their favorite local businesses. So it has a lot to do with people looking for that human element after lockdown. And just to further elaborate on that, in my travels to events, talking to audiences and the like, there's been such a powerful sense that people don't want to go back to the online way of doing things. I know this webinar is online, and I'm sure that a year from now we'll be having more physical events than online events through OrgJet as well. It's just a lot more cost effective and convenient for events during the working day. But for industry events, for conferences and the like, people have turned heavily against the online versions, and they want to be there in person. They want that human connection, that human touch. And in particular, that applies to younger customers. We were surprised. We thought that the older people would have missed their local businesses more, but it turns out that it's the younger customers who are most heavily affected. And we saw that in the school and university environment. My own daughters were, firstly, one matriculated in COVID, and the other finished her degree in COVID. And for both of them, it was a miserable experience. It truly diminished their experience of school and university, respectively. So you can understand how younger people in particular have that need for human connection. Older people do as well, but they tend to be more self-sufficient from a social point of view, whereas younger people almost require socialization to keep growing and to thrive. And then the last big insight, there's still more insights coming, but the last big one, we asked people if it's important to support local businesses, and 95% said yes. It was a massive level of unanimity in believing it's important to support local businesses. Prior to the pandemic, we never saw it at this kind of level. It was not that important. But what's happened in the last few years that has saddened people deeply is seeing local businesses close down because they couldn't survive the pandemic. They couldn't survive lockdowns and the like. And it was quite disheartening going through suburbs and seeing how many stores had closed down during that period. So as a result of that, there's a strong awareness of needing to support local businesses. So this is my favorite section of the research. We asked people what they like to do as a local. And the yellow bars are the ones, or the yellow parts of the graphs are the significant ones. 81% said they like to travel like a local. And that's a worldwide phenomenon where even when people travel to foreign countries, they want to experience what it's like to be a local when they travel. But far more significant than that was eating like a local. People want to have a local experience when they go out to eat. So of course the chains are still thriving, most of them, but a local eating establishment, a restaurant or a coffee shop that gives people those experiences, the all-round 360-degree experience we talked about earlier, are going to be busy all the time. And same with shops. The next highest was shopping like a local. People like to feel they're shopping in a local environment. So although ShopRite Checkers didn't feature as one of the winners, when we looked on a regional basis, in Mpumalanga especially, we found they really leaped out because they've given a more personalized, localized vibe to the shopping experience in their area. So that's the key takeaway almost from this survey. People also like to party like a local, but it's less important. They certainly don't want to decorate or maintain their homes in the same style as others in the area. Yeah, 63% do. But when you compare it to the unanimity of eating or shopping like a local, that's very low. Same with fashion and beauty trends as other people in the area. But what it all emphasizes is the extent to which people want to feel like a local when they're dealing with small businesses. And this really sums it up. Customers want the local experience. Although people like to follow global trends, there is a huge opportunity for neighborhood outlets to create an authentic local experience. So these are the key tips to emerge from the survey. And I'm going to pass this on to Tracy and Ariella, and they can share it with whoever wants to see the report. So you can read this on your own desktop more easily. But there's 5 key insights. In the report itself, there's a 6th one, but these are my 5 critical tips for small business owners following lockdown. Firstly, you can't afford to compromise on experience. If you need to invest more, then you must invest more. I'm shocked how few local businesses have invested, for example, in solar. So when there's load shedding, they have to shut down or their stores go dark. And we're not just talking about a shop or a restaurant, we talk about any kind of business. So we've just been at a B&B in Stellenbosch, where for the first time ever, we haven't had any issues with power or electricity because they decided to install solar a few years ago. And it means that they're always open for business and the customers are always happy with them because they don't experience what you experience at 99% of B&Bs in this country. Yes, it's a big investment, but now in particular, with solar rental options available, if you're a business, it's affordable. If you can't afford solar rental, then your business is probably not a viable business to start with. Secondly, a friendly face doesn't take much. It really doesn't. And yet some businesses seem to treat it as very painful to have to be friendly to their customers. We tend to, in fact, going to a restaurant now where if we get a surly service before we've even sat down, we're going to walk out, or we sit down, and the people who come and serve us, yeah, they may well have problems in their lives, and they're not happy that day, but they have an obligation to be friendly to their customers, because the customers want a good all-round experience. If they're not going to be friendly, if they're going to be surly, then we vote with our feet. It's as simple as that. And then the next 4, accommodate younger customers. There's an attitude in a lot of businesses that younger people have less spending power, so we don't have to look after them. We don't have to treat them like gold. And it's astonishing how often that happens. And we see it through the lenses of our children who experience that regularly. Customers will love you more if you're authentic. So it doesn't mean that you have to be all Africa or all Cape Town or whatever the case might be. But if you can give the experience of having your own traditions in particular, you're going to give a greater sense of authenticity, and people remember you for authenticity. And then something I alluded to earlier, even the biggest retail chains can create a local experience. And you see it in White River, for example. You see it in Nelspruit, where the local outlets are the big chains trying to be local businesses. And then finally, and this is a less of a critical insight, but it's one that you need to understand why people are raving about places like Kruger National Park, Monte Cassino, Sun City, etc. It's the sense that you're supporting local tourism, the sense that you're supporting job creation in South Africa. It's not only about supporting a small local business, it's also supporting the ecosystem of people trying to make a living in this country. And ultimately, those kind of establishments also offer an experience in the same way that food markets and local produce outlets, for example, do. So don't look down on people who enjoy going to the big tourist attractions. They're making as big a contribution as those supporting a small local business, because people working in those establishments in turn are supporting small local businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arthur. So interesting.
Any questions?
So interesting. I think one of the things that stands out to me is that, you know, we often function in a tunnel vision. So while we think we supporting local businesses, we actually supporting an economy. And that is something to keep forefront in our minds every time we do support local. I see David has his hand up.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi, David.
As always, thank you for unbelievable insight. Just a quick question. With the input like this, as a small local business, how can you use this information in your own business? So if I'm promoting my business, do I emphasize the local experience? Is that what you're suggesting? If
your business is not customer facing, in other words, if it's not a physical business, then you've got to look at that 360-degree experience element of the survey in terms of, I'm just going to go back quickly to look at it. A good experience overall, good service, value for money, and quality products stand out as the 4 most important features of what makes a business the most loved local business. In fact, those four stood out well above everything else. And as you can tell from those descriptions or those terms, they're not necessarily about a physical outlet or face-to-face interaction. They're about people's connection with your business, the experience of your business, and how you treat them. So a good overall experience, good service, value for money, and quality products. And then bring in features like friendly, if we look at the second level of responses in terms of what else people are looking for. Friendly staff, reward people for coming back. So if you get repeat business, then reward them for it, whether it's a gift or whether it's a discount or whatever the case might be. And then go the extra mile. Going the extra mile is so underrated because so few people actually, or so few businesses think about going the extra mile, but when they do, they're never forgotten.
And is this different? I mean, a lot of these things we all kind of know in the back of our mind as the truisms of business. Is this something new, or is it just the emphasis has changed?
The emphasis keeps changing, and you're absolutely right. These are all things that one should know, but the significance of the research is that it quantifies it, and it basically puts these factors front and center of your awareness of what makes a good business. And it reminds people to recalibrate the way they run their businesses and the way they treat customers, because over time you become complacent and you forget these things. So it serves as a reminder, but in terms of the most important features, that does shift, and it has shifted significantly since the pandemic. So, for example, a good overall experience didn't necessarily leap out as number one. I think good service was the number one before, and the good overall experience was not as important, or it didn't leap out above everything else. This time around, it leaps out massively above all the rest. Any other questions? Tracy?
I don't see any, but I wanted to mention as well, Arthur, the fact that Aki has done the most incredible work for Offjet in terms of his customer service, duets, trilogies, where he speaks about how to go that extra mile that's cost effective as a business owner, and how to retain your customers by doing all the little nice to haves and extras. So I do encourage everyone online today, if you haven't seen the trilogy on the Jetflix channel, please refer to it, because there are hundreds of very useful little tips to use in your business. I see Ian J.
Just to comment on that before you speak, Ian, is that if you follow Aki Kaliatakis's advice, then all of what I've shared with you today is just support material. You don't need to look to this for advice, because Aki's advice is so sound. Ian?
Yeah, thanks. Just a little comment, and I mean, I know, Arthur, you're obviously also involved in the tech world, and you write a lot about the use of tech in business and that type of thing. One of the things that sort of I found, and obviously grown in that, is access to decision makers. So I find a lot of companies, particularly larger companies, true, not smaller companies don't have that luxury, almost use call centers to block access to anybody who's actually in a position to make a decision when things go wrong, which is a very, very frustrating customer experience.
Very much so.
Pardon?
Very much so.
Yeah, and so that's just a point that the decision makers have to be hands-on and have to step up to the plate when there is an issue. And I guess that ties in with your personal service point, but it is something that the management needs to actually step up and take responsibility, which they often don't.
There's no question about it. It's one of the great failings of bigger businesses, is that they don't understand the need of the customer to speak to a human being who can actually make a decision. I fully agree with you on that. But there's a few levels of that. As businesses get bigger, they try to take the human element further and further away from the customer. So the giant global organizations like Google, Facebook, and the like, it's almost impossible to speak to a human being if you have a problem. And when something goes wrong, you get caught in an endless loop. And that's probably the great failing of big tech. They're fantastic at launching products, rolling them out and getting millions of users, but they're appallingly bad at helping when things go wrong. And that's the danger that's faced by what you might call the mid-tier corporations. When I say mid-tier, I'm talking about the likes of mobile operators, banks, insurance companies that also try to avoid dealing directly with the customer, because they're trying to automate everything, because it makes it more cost effective and they need less people.
Thank you.
Ariella.
Yes, yeah, you're leading me to the next question. You probably could guess what I would ask you. But with the technology pace, you know, I heard that with ChatGPT, there's an estimation by 2030, 90% of the content written will be automated. So I just wonder, I know that it's quite new and it's quite, everybody's exploring it, and there's more questions than answers. I'm just wondering, with this technology coming in and even distancing more the human aspect, how this will affect local businesses.
I think it has the potential to make businesses more personal. And that sounds like a contradiction in terms, but bear with me. I've got a fundamental belief that too much of what we do is drudge work that's resented and done badly. Communication from businesses, letters and the like, are often unreadable. If a business could take its legal contracts and run it through ChatGPT or Bing AI and say, please turn this into everyday language, it can do that in seconds, whereas to give that to a human being to do will probably take a few days. So it has the potential to improve contracts and communications, terms and conditions, and the like. So that's one area where I see the potential for massive improvement. Of course, lawyers will resist this at all costs, and they'll warn that companies are rendering themselves liable to legal action for not having a proper legal document. But that's just the lawyers wanting to earn their keep for writing wording that no one can understand. But it also applies in other areas. So, for example, when I've got my team working on a research project, they spend days, or they used to spend days, going through search results, trying to find specific topics and best practice in specific areas, and then summarizing that. And even after summarizing it, it's still someone else's work. You just essentially summarizing what other people say is best practice. So there's absolutely no reason. I'm just giving you this as an immediate example that we have. There's no reason not to say to a chat bot like ChatGPT or Bing or Google Bard to say, please take all of this content and organize it into something structured and with a process. It then delivers that to you, and then you use that as the basis or the framework for what you are going to produce. That enables us in particular to produce far better work, because we can spend more time on reworking it or working our insights into that framework, because those frameworks typically don't have much insight. We tend to, through our research, have far deeper insights, which we can then overlay onto those frameworks. But because we're not spending so much time on the framework itself, we can spend a lot more time building quality insights and producing better reports. So as a support mechanism, I believe it's going to be fantastic for businesses that deal in information and communication. By the way, that's a topic that I've literally talked about for an hour. So that's just a very short summary.
I think will be nice, Tracy, to, if when Arthur is available, to, because we want every month to have someone talking about the ChatGPT, and I think every month there'll be new progress happening. So we have opening from June onwards.
What I would like to suggest, Ariella and Tracy, I had a very successful session with the Professional Editors Group, which they termed it a coffee and chat session. So it was very informal. And that was one of those hour-long sessions I was talking about. They had 100 people on the session because there was so much interest in the topic.
Wow.
And having that approach rather than a formal presentation of findings, I think will be far more effective. So call it a coffee morning or coffee session.
I like it.
Where I can give a quick summary of the current state of play, which 6 months from now is going to be very different to what it is at the moment. And people can talk through their experiences and also ask their questions. And we can have that debate as well on the ethics and the like. By then, I'll also probably have learned a lot more about copyright and ethical issues.
Ian, I think you can be a very good person to be on board on that, because there are lots of issues that will be interesting to hear from a legal perspective. Ian Jacobsberg.
As long as Arthur and I don't get into a boxing match about lawyers.
Oh, you will. That's what I want you there.
Oops. I will say in my defense, my younger daughter is studying law, so she's going to be a lawyer. So I do have to moderate any comments on lawyers. But if I can just say, it was actually her 21st birthday yesterday. What's today? It's Tuesday. No, sorry, on Sunday. And I had to make a little speech in which I drew on some quotes about lawyers, and they were very inspirational quotes. Lawyers do great things, but not when it comes to the contracts that companies put out for their customers.
You know what? I do have to agree with you, but there are also limits to, and I've seen contracts where they've gone overboard trying to write colloquial language to the point where it's so colloquial it's almost meaningless.
Yeah, no, sure. I hear you.
Yeah.
So before we close off today, talking about coffee and a chat tomorrow at Ort at 8:30, you are all invited to join us for an incredible talk by Ariella Rosenberg on ChatGPT. And yes, we will be serving coffee. So please join us. If you haven't booked a space already, please let me know if you would like to attend, and we will save a space for you. In terms of our wrap up this morning, it's been absolutely amazing. And yes, we all know what we have to do as small businesses to go the extra mile and to ensure that we are top of mind and relevant in the consumer's minds. But when Arthur presents, and through all the extensive research he's done, he just simplifies it. He makes it so understandable and gives us our key points, which I will be sharing with you afterwards in the slide deck. And Arthur, always, you bring so much value to our program. We are very, very grateful. Before we close off today, I'm going to put up the last feedback poll. If you weren't online earlier when I did put it up, now is your opportunity to make a donation to AltJet. We will be hosting our call-a-thon. I recruit you all to come in, volunteer your time, and help us raise funds for AltJet. It's going to be an incredible 2 days on the 25th and 26th of April. So put up your hand to volunteer for that as well. And we will see you all online soon, but tomorrow and Thursday's event at Alt are live. Tomorrow with Ariella, ChatGPT, and Thursday, business plan processing with Amanda Blankfield-Kossoff. So thank you all for joining us this morning. Arthur, thank you so much. And you can be assured I will be phoning you within the next 5 minutes or so.
Anytime.
So thank you so much for this morning. It's been amazing.
Thanks,
Right.
Tracy.
Thank
Just gets
you.
better.